Hello and welcome back. First of all, huge congrats on making it this far because forms can be pretty overwhelming. There's a lot in there, but the nice thing to know is that you don't actually have to use all of this right away, and with a lot of practice and just over time, really, it just becomes second nature. It becomes really, really easy. As soon as you start learning CSS and JavaScript and other languages, all of this becomes so easy you can do this in your sleep. It's just a little difficult at first. So I'm glad you're bearing with me and you're sticking with this course and you're making progress. Now in this video, what I would like us to learn is buttons. We've seen a submit button, but we haven't seen other forms of buttons. And I actually prefer this method of creating a button. So instead of using an input type is equal to submit, we're going to use an element just called button, and we can give it a type as well, but it only has 3 types to choose from. So now we're getting a little more verbose in what the actual element is, and it just makes a little more sense to me. Now this is totally up to you if you want to use it this way or not, but it's good to know because you're going to see it out in the wild. So let's go ahead and get started with that right now. So I just have VS Code open here, and I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this buttons.html, and let's give it HTML5 structure. We'll call this buttons, and in our body, we are going to create a brand new form. And so we have a form in here. The method is going to be get, the action is going to be blank, and we have a closing form tag. Now let's add an input field. Input is equal to type. Do we want it to be text? Nah, let's make this an email. Better yet, let's make this a URL. Let's give it a placeholder. A placeholder is equal to https your website.com. And you know what? Let's put this on different lines because, hey, if we're allowed to do it, why not? Let's give it a default value of https codingforeverybody.com. Let's give it a name. Just call it website. And now let's take a look at the page to see where we're at. So let's open up buttons.html and we have a regular text field. Nothing fancy at all. Just takes a URL, just takes a link. Up until now, we've been using input type is equal to submit, and that creates a button. So let's go over this as a little refresher. So submit in all caps. And we see a button that says submit. Now let's comment that out in HTML. And to comment, all I did was hit command plus slash. It might be different in your editor depending on what you're using and what your settings are, but there is usually a shortcut to instantly comment something out. Now let's create a new element called a button. And this is neat. It gives us all sorts of stuff in here, but we're not going to do that. Let's just create a regular button. Now this button has a type, and there are 4 types to choose. We can use a button, a menu, reset, and submit. The most common you will find is button and submit. A button does nothing, does absolutely nothing. It is purely, watch this, it does not submit the form. My page is not refreshing, nothing is happening. This is purely aesthetic. And once you get into JavaScript, you're going to write all sorts of buttons, and those buttons are going to have actions. So someone could say, create a button that says, click me. And when they get clicked, or when this button gets clicked, it could do something. HTML does not have the capability of doing that particular thing yet. We need to get into the world of JavaScript for that. And that comes a little bit down the road. Next, we have reset. And reset form is what this is going to be called. I am just butchering this right now. Reset form. There we go. And this is going to, it looks like it's doing nothing, but it's going to reset your form to whatever the default values are. So if I said blah, 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 and I click reset form, it's going to put codingforeverybody.com in there. And the reason it does that is because that is the default value that we've given it. If we get rid of this default value, so we just have our ghost text in there, our placeholder, and we said blah, 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 and reset form, it goes to nothing. In the wild, you don't see that one too often anymore. Occasionally you'll run into it, but honestly, I probably only run into this one a few times a year, and it's not too often I actually have to program this one into a website. There are other ways of adding validation and getting people to sort of just fill out one particular field or resetting a particular field. But it's good to know that this exists. We have 2 more in here. We have menu, which we're not going to touch on because that is going to be a little bit too much, and that's part of a bigger lesson. And we have submit, and submit is going to submit the form. Now, these two are essentially the same. Actually, let's do this. Nope, not you submit, just submit. These two elements are essentially the same. One is using a value to add text, and one is just adding regular text between two tags. Now, I like this one better. I like the button better because we can also split it onto multiple lines, and it just makes it easier to read. We can also disable this. It's not disable, it's disabled. There we go. It looks faded out, so we can't click it anymore. And if we get rid of that, we can. Now watch my URL. It's going to go to buttons.html, website is equal to https, a bunch of URL encoded stuff, codingforeverybody.com. And voila, we see buttons.html website is equal to https, a bunch of stuff, codingforeverybody.com. Now again, it's really up to you which one you want to use. It doesn't really matter if you want to use input type is equal to submit or button type is equal to submit. I have a preference towards button just because I think it's a little cleaner, and when someone looks at it, they don't have to go, oh, this is an input field, because technically it's not. Technically, it's a button. So it just makes it a little bit more verbose. I like that method, but hey, you know what? If you disagree with me, well, that's the nice thing about computer programming is you're allowed to disagree with me. You're allowed to use whatever method makes more sense to you. Now your task for this video is create a brand new form. Again, make sure your method is equal to get. You have an action is equal to blank, so the page submits onto itself. Create an input, basically, just do exactly what I did. Create a button, and then try using type is equal to reset and type is equal to submit. And see what the difference does, and just tinker around with it. Get a feel for it. There's no rush. You don't have to learn all of this in one day or anything. HTML is not going anywhere. It's been around for well over 20 years now. It's not going anywhere. Once you're done that, let's head on over to that next lesson, and I think you and I should start learning about drop-down menus.